The shot came out of nowhere, a beam of searing light that sliced through the air like a surgeon's scalpel, piercing the target's bullseye with impossible precision. The wooden post exploded into splinters, and a silence fell over the stunned crowd. Soldiers, generals, and snipers from across the world stared at the smoking ruin of what used to be a perfect target. A raspy voice crackled over the alien warship's broadcast. "Is this your best?" the voice mocked. "Your finest shooters are little more than children with sticks." The world had watched in disbelief over the last few weeks as Earth's most elite snipers had lined up to challenge the alien sharpshooters, and failed miserably. Marines, Navy SEALs, British SAS, even Olympic marksmen had taken their shot, only to be outclassed by the otherworldly precision of the alien invaders. The aliens' technology bent physics itself. Shots curved through walls, pierced armor, and struck their targets with unnatural accuracy. The aliens didn't just beat Earth's best, they humiliated them. On the far side of the base, Jake Briggs sat on a crate, flicking pebbles at a tin can. He grinned lazily, sipping from a battered coffee mug that smelled more like engine oil than caffeine. His spotter, Corporal Tasha Brooks, leaned on the wall beside him. "You're not seriously thinking of stepping into this," Tasha said, arms crossed. "I know you love trouble, but this is suicidal." Briggs chuckled and flicked another pebble, knocking the can off the crate. "They're good," he said. "But they ain't invincible." "They've got tech that curves bullets," Tasha shot back. "They've got, I don't know, telescopic eyes or some alien heat vision junk. They're playing a whole different game." "They're cocky," Briggs muttered. "That's their weakness." Moments later, the base commander's voice boomed from the PA system, announcing yet another embarrassing defeat, the third that day. The aliens had even offered a deal, a final challenge, one last duel. One sniper, Earth's best, against their champion. If Earth won, the aliens would leave. If they lost, the aliens claimed Earth's resources for themselves. That's when Briggs stood up, stretched his back, and said the words that would become infamous. "Guess I'd better dust off my rifle." 2 hours later, Briggs found himself at the mission briefing. Tasha stood beside him, arms crossed, still shaking her head. The room was crowded with generals and intelligence officers who all seemed equally confused as to why Briggs, a foul-mouthed Marine scout with a reputation for bending rules, had volunteered. "Sergeant Briggs," the commanding officer barked, "I trust you understand what you're walking into. I understand that these overgrown iguanas have never faced a real Marine." Briggs shot back, his crooked smile defying the grim atmosphere. "They can bend bullets all they want, but they can't bend dumb luck." The room didn't laugh. Instead, the intelligence officer stepped forward with a hologram. The alien champion, Commander Zelvik, appeared in rotating 3D. His eyes were like molten gold, and his rifle, long, sleek, and humming with power, looked more like a sniper rifle designed by a mad scientist. "This isn't luck," the officer warned. "Zelvik has a neural implant that enhances his vision beyond human limits. His rifle uses gravitational fields to manipulate bullet trajectories. He can hit you behind a brick wall if he wants to." "Great," Briggs said dryly. "Guess I'd better avoid brick walls then." Later that evening, as the challenge details spread across the internet, Briggs became a minor celebrity. Hashtags like #Marine vs. Alien and #DeadiJake started trending. Memes popped up with Briggs in a cowboy hat facing off against a green, bug-eyed alien. Briggs didn't mind the attention. He knew this whole thing was about mind games as much as marksmanship. The night before the duel, Tasha found him cleaning his rifle. She stood silently in the doorway, watching him as he carefully checked the scope. "You know," she said softly, "I tell you not to do this, but you're stubborn as hell." Briggs grinned. "I'll be fine. Besides," he tapped the side of his rifle, "this girl's never let me down." Tasha's face hardened. "They're not just good shooters, Jake. There's something else. Be smart." "I always am," he said with a wink. The next morning, the battleground was set, an abandoned cityscape filled with crumbling buildings, shattered glass, and twisted metal. The duel would be a cat-and-mouse game, No time limits, no rules, just two snipers hunting each other. Briggs lay hidden inside a partially collapsed office building, rifle steadied on the window ledge. The air was still. Dust floated lazily through the broken glass. His heartbeat thumped steadily in his ears. Then it came, a faint glint of metal on a rooftop across the street. He froze. A lens flare. His instinct screamed that it was Zelvik. Briggs exhaled slowly and adjusted his scope. The crosshairs hovered over the faint glimmer. He squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, and a split second later, an impossible beam of energy streaked from the rooftop. His bullet was deflected midair, vaporized by whatever alien tech Zelvik had. The metal beam beside Briggs' head sizzled with a molten hole the size of a quarter. "Okay," Briggs muttered. "That's new." Tasha's voice crackled through the earpiece. "He's playing with you. He could have hit you if he wanted to." "Good," Briggs grinned. "That means he's cocky." Hours passed. Zelvik's shots seemed to bend around corners, curve through windows, and strike just inches from Briggs' hiding spots. Each miss felt deliberate, like Zelvik was taunting him. Briggs knew he couldn't win in a straight shootout. He needed a trick, something the aliens wouldn't expect. He reached into his pack and pulled out a heat pack from his rations kit. Quickly, he tied it to his vest and propped the dummy against the wall. He aimed his rifle through the crack in the door and waited. Moments later, the beam struck the heat pack, blowing the decoy to bits. Briggs didn't hesitate. He fired, this time targeting the faint shimmer in the air where Zelvik's rifle had glinted moments before. A metallic clang echoed back. His shot had struck Zelvik's rifle. "Nice!" Tasha's voice cheered through the calm. "You just made him mad." Then came the real surprise. Zelvik's broadcast echoed through the city. "You think this is over?" The alien's voice was cold, cruel. "I brought friends." Briggs's blood chilled. Across the rooftops, faint figures appeared, alien snipers spreading out, forming a perimeter. "You've got to be kidding me," Briggs muttered. "This guy brought backup." "Jake," Tasha said urgently. "Get out of there." "No," Briggs said through gritted teeth, adjusting his scope. "Let's see how good they are without their leader." As the first alien sniper took position, Briggs fired. The fight had only just begun. The sun hung low over the ruined cityscape, casting long shadows across the jagged remains of buildings. Dust lingered in the air, thick and heavy, clinging to the back of Jake Briggs' throat as he crawled deeper into the wreckage. His heartbeat thudded like a drum in his chest. The shot he'd fired had damaged Zelvik's rifle, but the alien wasn't finished yet. Worse, the reinforcements were now spreading across the perimeter, cutting off any easy escape. He peeked through a crack in the wall, scanning the rooftops. 3 figures moved in tandem, their slender forms barely visible against the fading light. Each of them carried a sleek rifle similar to Zelvik's, and Briggs knew that if even one of them had the same curved shot technology, he was in serious trouble. "Jake!" Tasha's voice crackled over the earpiece, faint but steady. "2 on the west building, 1 at your 6. They're closing in." "Figured as much," Briggs muttered. He shifted his rifle, tracking the nearest sniper. The figure paused on the roof ledge, surveying the area like a hawk. Briggs adjusted his breathing, held the rifle steady, and squeezed the trigger. The shot struck true. The alien's body staggered, limbs flailing as it tumbled from the rooftop, smashing through a rusted fire escape before hitting the ground below. Briggs barely had time to feel the rush of satisfaction before a searing bolt of energy tore through the air just inches from his face. Diving low, he rolled into a side hallway, shattering a dusty window in the process. Glass rained down on his back as another shot melted the brick wall beside him. Heat radiated from the impact point, stinging his arm through his uniform. The aliens weren't playing anymore. "West snipers are shifting," Tasha reported through the earpiece. "They're closing in." Briggs gritted his teeth. He knew these alien snipers weren't just skilled, they were coordinated. Their rifles bent physics, and their enhanced vision made it impossible to stay hidden for long. He needed to shake them, and fast. He crawled along the broken floor, maneuvering past shattered desks and fallen ceiling tiles. Somewhere above, faint footsteps scraped across concrete. The aliens were spreading out. He grabbed a nearby metal pipe, broke it in half, and hurled one piece toward the far side of the room. The clanging sound echoed loudly, and almost immediately, a blast of alien fire struck the spot where the pipe had landed. "That's right," Briggs muttered. "Keep wasting shots." A second sniper moved in from the side. Briggs ducked behind a filing cabinet, feeling the sharp heat of another blast just above his head. Dust cascaded from the ceiling, and for a moment, Briggs felt like the entire building might come down on him. "Jake!" Tasha's voice crackled again, more urgent now. "You've got to move. They're closing from 3 sides." "Notice that," Briggs grunted. He pulled a smoke grenade from his vest, yanked the pin, and tossed it down the hallway. The corridor filled with thick white fog, swallowing everything in its path. Using the cover, Briggs sprinted to the far end of the room, sliding through a broken doorway just as another energy shot sizzled through the smoke behind him. Outside, Briggs scrambled over twisted beams and broken bricks. He climbed a half-collapsed stairwell, taking 2 steps at a time. At the top, he paused to catch his breath, then glanced back. The smoke was thinning, but the figures moving through it were unmistakable. 2 of the alien snipers, rifles glowing faintly as they hunted him. "Any ideas?" Briggs muttered. "Yeah," Tasha's voice came back. "Run faster." The rooftop was a jagged mess of broken antennas and rusting metal, but it gave him the height advantage he needed. Briggs crouched low behind an air conditioning unit, watching the aliens advance below. He slung his rifle over his back, dug into his pack, and found what he needed, a small mirror from his emergency kit. Peeking over the ledge, Briggs angled the mirror to catch the fading sunlight and flashed it toward the smoke-filled corridor. The brief glint of light caught one of the sniper's attention. The figure turned sharply, raising its weapon. That's what Briggs had been waiting for. He shifted position, aimed, and fired. The shot cut across the rooftop, striking the alien sniper square in the head. The creature's body crumpled instantly. "One left," Briggs muttered. "Correction," Tasha's voice broke in. "2. Zelvik's back. And I don't think he's happy." Briggs' stomach tightened. He shifted to the far side of the rooftop, eyes scanning for movement. Then he saw him, Zelvik moving steadily through the rubble below, his damaged rifle now replaced with something bigger, bulkier, and glowing faintly at its core. Zelvik's head turned sharply, and Briggs knew the alien had spotted him. Before he could react, a beam of energy erupted from the new rifle. The shot curved unnaturally through the air, arcing around a twisted metal beam and slamming into the air conditioning unit beside him. The explosion rocked the rooftop, sending Briggs sprawling. "I'm out of tricks," he muttered, coughing as he dragged himself to his knees. "Not yet," Tasha's voice broke in. "I've got an idea. I hope it's a good one." "You're on top of an old generator building," she said. "Those cables running along the wall? They're still live. If you can bait Selvik into shooting one." "You want me to play lightning rod?" Briggs muttered. "Trust me," Tasha insisted. Briggs scrambled across the rooftop, staying low as another blast scorched the wall behind him. He grabbed one of the live cables, its insulation barely intact. Sparks flickered from its frayed ends. "Here's hoping this works," he whispered. He popped up just long enough to wave his arm and shout, "Hey, glow eyes! Miss me?" Selvik turned, eyes narrowing. His rifle hummed as another beam charged. Briggs waited until the air felt thick with static before diving behind a metal vent. The shot struck the cable directly. The explosion was instant. Sparks erupted in every direction, and arcs of electricity danced wildly across the walls. Zelvik's rifle crackled, then sputtered as his weapon overloaded. The alien staggered backward, disoriented. Briggs seized the moment, leveled his rifle, and fired. The bullet tore through Zelvik's shoulder. The alien dropped to one knee, snarling. His rifle clattered to the ground, its core flickering weakly. "Not so tough without your toys," Briggs muttered. Zelvik's golden eyes locked on him, and for the first time, Briggs saw something more than just arrogance. He saw anger, burning and raw. The alien reached for a concealed blade strapped to his side. "Oh, come on!" Briggs muttered. "Really?" Before Zelvik could move, a distant crack echoed through the air. The blade slipped from his fingers, and the alien collapsed face first into the dirt. "Nice shot," Briggs muttered into his earpiece. "I told you I had a good idea," Tasha's voice replied. Briggs leaned back against the wall, chest heaving. The dust settled, and for the first time in hours, the silence felt like victory. He closed his eyes, muttering a tired laugh. "I'm buying the first round," he said. "You better," Tasha shot back. "I just saved your sorry ass." The air was still thick with the stench of burning metal and scorched concrete. Briggs sat with his back against the cracked wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His muscles ached, and his head pounded like someone had been playing drums inside his skull. His rifle lay across his lap, the barrel still hot from the shot that had dropped Zelvik. The alien's body lay motionless below, slumped in a twisted heap near the broken generator cables. It should have felt like victory, but something gnawed at him, a cold, uneasy feeling that this wasn't over. "Jake!" Tasha's voice crackled faintly through the earpiece. "Status?" "Alive," Briggs muttered, wiping sweat from his face. "Zelvik's down. The backup snipers are gone. I think that's game over." There was a long pause. "I don't think so," Tasha said, her voice tense. "I'm picking up movement, multiple heat signatures, and they're closing in on your position fast." Briggs' stomach tightened. He reached for his scope and peered across the wreckage. Shadows flickered through the haze, faint figures weaving between the crumbled walls and shattered vehicles. At least 5 of them, maybe more. He realized too late that Zelvik's squad wasn't just backup snipers, they were an entire strike team. "Looks like they're not so losers," Briggs muttered, shifting back into cover. "I thought this was a one-on-one duel. Guess they didn't get the memo." "They're not here to duel," Tasha warned. "They're here to finish the job." Briggs knew he couldn't stay pinned down. He pushed himself up and sprinted along the rooftop's edge, his boots thudding against loose gravel. A searing blast tore past him, slicing through the rusted air conditioning unit he'd used for cover earlier. He stumbled, ducking behind a crumbling concrete wall just as another shot struck where he'd been standing. "Keep moving!" Tasha barked. "They're tracking your heat signature." "Great," Briggs muttered. "They brought magic heat goggles too." He gritted his teeth, digging into his pack for the last smoke grenade. He yanked the pin, rolled it across the rooftop, and bolted toward a shattered stairwell as smoke billowed behind him. The air was thick and acrid as he stumbled down the stairs 2 at a time, his rifle slung awkwardly over his shoulder. The moment he hit the ground floor, he stopped. The room was pitch dark, the air cold and stale. The distant shuffle of boots told him the aliens were close. He knew they had better vision in low light, so staying still wasn't an option. Moving quickly but quietly, he ducked behind a rusted metal filing cabinet and scanned for an exit. There was none, just concrete walls and broken windows far too small to squeeze through. A metallic click echoed in the hallway. Briggs froze. The footsteps stopped. The sound of something mechanical whirred faintly, like a laser charging. "Jake!" Tasha's voice whispered urgently in his ear. "They're scanning for you. If they see your heat signature, you're done." Briggs thought fast. He slid his rifle behind a fallen desk and stripped off his tactical vest. The heat pack he'd rigged earlier was still tucked inside. He stuffed the vest beneath a nearby chair, then crawled toward a shattered window. The door creaked open, and a faint glow illuminated the room. Briggs held his breath. Through the fog of smoke and dust, he spotted one of the alien soldiers, taller than Zelvik, bulkier too, with armor that pulsed faintly like veins glowing beneath skin. The figure's glowing visor locked on to the false heat signature under the chair. The alien fired. The blast shredded the wall, sending chunks of concrete and sparks flying. The desk flipped over, smoke curling from the smoldering remains of Briggs' vest. In the chaos, Briggs dove through the broken window, landing hard on the gravel outside. Pain shot up his arm as he hit the ground, but he forced himself to his feet and bolted across the alleyway. "Nice trick," Tasha said through the comms. "But they're still closing in." "I notice," Briggs growled. He turned a corner, weaving through the ruins of an old convenience store. Shelves lay overturned, their contents long picked clean. His boots crunched on shattered glass as he moved deeper into the building. "Hold up," Tasha's voice interrupted. "I've been digging into Zelvik's weapon tech, that power core they use. It's not just a fancy battery. It's transmitting." "Transmitting what?" Briggs asked, keeping his voice low. "Target data," Tasha replied. "They've been marking you with some kind of tracking pulse since the fight started." Briggs cursed under his breath. "So they're not just following my footprints. They've got me tagged." "Pretty much," Tasha said. "But there's good news. Those pulses? They're designed to guide curved shots. If you can jam the signal, they can't hit me," Briggs finished. "Tell me you've got a plan." "Sort of," Tasha said. "That convenience store you're in, check the electronics aisle. If the place wasn't picked clean, you might find a signal jammer or an old RF emitter." Briggs moved fast, stepping over broken shelves and digging through piles of debris. Cables, cracked radios, a busted cash register, nothing useful. Then he spotted it, a small, dusty signal jammer, barely the size of a deck of cards. The plastic casing was cracked, but the wiring looked intact. "Found one," he muttered. "Good," Tasha said. "Now find somewhere to make your stand." Briggs grabbed the jammer and climbed to the second floor of the store, settling in behind a half-broken window. He turned the device on, watching as a faint red light flickered to life. He adjusted his scope and waited. The first alien appeared minutes later, moving carefully through the street below. The bulky soldier scanned the area, aiming his weapon at every flicker of movement. But as soon as the sniper's rifle began to hum, Briggs noticed the shot arc awkwardly, slamming into a nearby wall instead of its target. "Signals scrambled," Tasha's voice confirmed. "Their magic bullet tricks won't work anymore." Briggs smiled grimly. He steadied his rifle, took a breath, and fired. The bullet struck clean, sending the alien crashing to the pavement. More soldiers appeared soon after. The fight was brutal. Briggs shifted positions, picking off targets from rooftops, alleyways, and shattered windows. Each shot was a calculated risk, each movement a desperate gamble. His arms ached, and his breathing grew ragged, but he refused to slow down. Finally, after what felt like hours, the last alien fell. Briggs leaned against a cracked pillar, rifle resting across his lap. His fingers were numb, his clothes soaked with sweat. "Clear," Tasha's voice said at last. "You did it." Briggs gave a dry chuckle. "Tell that to my ribs." "Get out of there," Tasha said. "I've got a ride coming for you." Briggs staggered out into the street, the rising sun casting golden light across the shattered city. Bodies of fallen aliens lay scattered around him, their strange weapons still smoldering in the dust. As Briggs limped forward, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. "Hey!" Tasha's voice broken again. "Next time you pick a fight with intergalactic warlords, try to invite me to the party first." Briggs laughed softly. "Wouldn't be the same without you." Briggs sat in the back of the transport truck, his head resting against the cold metal wall as the engine rumbled beneath him. His body ached in places he didn't know could ache, and every breath felt like he'd been hit with a sledgehammer. His rifle lay across his lap, his fingers still locked around the grip, even though the fight was over. He knew better than to let go just yet. The moment he started to relax was always when things went sideways. The truck lurched to a stop, and the doors creaked open. Tasha's face appeared, tired but grinning. She climbed into the truck and dropped heavily onto the bench across from him. "You look like hell," she said, tossing him a bottle of water. Briggs cracked the bottle open and downed half of it in one go. "Feel worse," he muttered. "You should," Tasha replied. "They had you cornered twice. You're lucky you're too stubborn to die." Briggs chuckled, but it came out as more of a wheeze. "I'll take stubborn over smart any day." The ride back to base was quiet. The adrenaline had worn off, and the weight of everything that had happened was finally settling in. The alien sharpshooters were dead, but Briggs couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. Zelvik had been confident, too confident, even when he was losing. That final look in the alien's eyes hadn't been panic or fear. It had been something else, something colder. Whatever Zelvik had been planning, Briggs doubted it had ended on that rooftop. The base was buzzing when they arrived. Soldiers hurried from tent to tent, officers barked orders, and communications teams were working furiously at their stations. Something was happening. Tasha grabbed a passing lieutenant by the arm. "What's going on?" she asked. "Signal intercepted," the lieutenant said breathlessly. "Just after Zelvik went down. They were transmitting something, a set of coordinates. We're still decrypting the data." Briggs felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "Coordinates for what?" "Unknown," the lieutenant replied. "But whatever it is, it's big. Command's got everyone on alert." The command tent was filled with officers staring at a glowing map of the Earth. Red dots were scattered across the continents, clustered around major cities and military installations. The encrypted data was being broken down in real time, and each decoded symbol seemed to reveal a new target. "They weren't here to just test our snipers," Tasha muttered. "They were mapping us." Briggs clenched his fists. "And we walked right into it." Moments later, a tech officer's voice broke through the room. "Sir, we've confirmed it. The transmission contained targeting data for orbital strikes." The room went cold. Satellite strikes. The aliens hadn't come for a duel. They'd come to map Earth's most vulnerable points, key defenses, supply lines, and energy grids. They had fed that information back to their fleet. Zelvik's mission wasn't about proving dominance. It was about setting the stage for a full-scale invasion. "They're planning an assault," the commander said grimly. "And we don't know when it's coming." Briggs slammed his fist on the table hard enough to rattle the maps. "We need to hit them first." The commander shook his head. "We don't know where they're staging. Their fleet's hidden, could be behind the moon, in orbit, or further out. We're blind." Briggs paced the room, mind racing. He thought back to the duel, to the twisted rifle Zelvik had been using. The alien tech hadn't just been powerful, it had been complex. Overdesigned. The rifle's core had pulsed constantly, even when Zelvik wasn't firing. "That's it," Briggs muttered to himself. "What's it?" Tasha asked. "Zelvik's rifle," Briggs said. "It wasn't just a weapon, it was a relay. He wasn't just shooting at me. He was feeding intel back to the fleet the whole time. If they were using those cores to transmit data..." Tasha's eyes widened. "Then we can track the signal." Minutes later, the tech team was scanning recorded frequencies from the fight. The signal pattern was faint but unmistakable, a series of bursts designed to encode positional data. Tasha leaned over the technician's shoulder, tracing the signal back along its path. "There," she said, pointing at the screen. "Lagrange point 4. A cold silence fell over the room. Lagrange point 4 was a gravitational sweet spot in space, a perfect hiding place for a fleet, stable, secure, and positioned for a fast strike on Earth. The commander looked at Briggs. "Looks like you're not done yet." Hours later, Briggs stood on the deck of a high-altitude strike aircraft. The engines roared beneath his boots as the team prepped for deployment. The mission was clear: locate the alien fleet, disrupt their transmissions, and neutralize their targeting system before the invasion could begin. Tasha stood beside him, securing her gear. "You know," she said with a crooked smile, "if you keep risking your life like this, I'm gonna start charging you for medical bills." Briggs grinned. "I'll take it out of your beer tab." The strike team deployed in high-altitude suits, descending silently through the thin upper atmosphere. The fleet appeared as a cluster of metallic shapes, hanging in the void like enormous, predatory insects. The alien ships gleamed with cold silver plating, their weapons arrays glowing faintly along their hulls. Briggs and his team landed on the hull of the lead ship. They moved quickly, planting charges near the exposed transmission relays. The ship's surface pulsed with alien energy, and Briggs could feel the static charge humming beneath his boots. The first explosion ripped through the relay system, and panic erupted within the fleet. The alien ships flickered with disrupted energy, their coordinated targeting systems failing one by one. But the aliens fought back. Energy blasts streaked through space, searing past the strike team as they scrambled to disable the remaining systems. Briggs ducked behind a raised panel, barely avoiding a bolt of plasma that scorched the hull beside him. "They're rerouting the signal!" Tasha shouted. "They've still got partial control." Briggs spotted the final transmitter, a thick, spiked tower at the ship's stern. He sprinted toward it, planting his last charge just as another energy beam cut across his path. He felt the heat of the blast wash over him, searing his side and knocking him flat against the hull. "Jake!" Tasha's voice rang through the calm. "I'm fine," Briggs groaned, dragging himself forward. The timer on the charge blinked steadily. He punched in the countdown, and rolled away just as the tower exploded in a blinding flash. The alien fleet lurched as if disoriented. Smaller ships veered wildly off course. Energy cannons sputtered and died. Whatever coordination they'd relied on was gone. "Nice work," Tasha's voice cheered in his ear. "The invasion's dead in the water." Briggs leaned back, chest heaving as he stared out into the dark void. The stars flickered faintly in the distance, cold and indifferent. Back on Earth, Briggs sat quietly beside Tasha in the base infirmary. His ribs were bruised, his shoulder wrapped in gauze, and every muscle felt like it had been put through a meat grinder. Tasha, bandaged herself, grinned weakly from the bed beside him. "So," she muttered, "did we win?" Briggs chuckled softly. "Yeah," he said. "We won." Tasha grinned wider. "Good," she said. "Because I'm still charging you for those beers." Briggs closed his eyes, letting out a tired laugh. "Fair enough," he muttered. "Fair enough." The base was quieter now, but there was no sense of celebration. Victory had come at a cost, and everyone knew it. Soldiers moved through the camp with tired eyes and slumped shoulders. The damage reports kept rolling in, satellites were down, communications were strained, and parts of Earth's defenses had been severely weakened. The alien fleet had been crippled, but Earth's military wasn't sure if they were prepared for what came next. Everyone knew there was a chance the aliens would regroup and return. Briggs sat alone on the edge of a rusted supply crate, staring out at the horizon. The morning sky was painted in shades of pale orange, the air still crisp from the night's chill. His ribs still throbbed with a dull ache, and the bandages wrapped tightly around his side felt like a vice. Every breath reminded him of the plasma blast that had nearly cut him down on the alien ship. Tasha found him there, quietly stepping out of the medical tent with a mug of coffee in her hand. She walked over, handed it to him without a word, and sat beside him. The two of them sat in silence for a long moment, the steam curling lazily from the mug in Briggs' hands. "Hell of a week," Tasha finally muttered. Briggs took a sip of the bitter coffee and nodded. "Yeah," he said. "One for the record books." They both stared at the distant hills, where the wreckage of a downed alien craft still smoldered faintly. Recovery crews had been pulling out pieces of strange technology, each device more bizarre and unsettling than the last. Some of it seemed harmless, broken components that looked like twisted metal sculptures. But other pieces flickered with faint energy pulses, suggesting that whatever power source the aliens had relied on wasn't fully extinguished. "You think they'll come back?" Tasha asked, her voice quieter now. Briggs let out a breath, slow and heavy. "Yeah," he said. "I do." Tasha shifted uncomfortably. "I figured," she said. "Guess that means you'll be sticking around." Briggs chuckled dryly. "Don't have much choice now, do I?" He set the mug down on the crate beside him. "They'll come back smarter next time. They won't be wasting time showing off in sniper duels or testing their tech. They'll come in hard and fast. And when they do, they'll expect us to still be patching up what's left of our defenses." Tasha nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about that." she said. About their tech. Briggs turned to her. What about it? I don't think Zelvik's mission was just about gathering coordinates or testing our snipers, Tasha said. That wasn't just some power trip. I think they were studying us, how we fight, how we adapt. They weren't just collecting data on our defenses. They were learning how to exploit our tactics. Briggs frowned. You think they've figured out how to counter our strategies? Tasha shrugged. I think they'll be ready for everything we threw at them last time. The smoke tricks, the decoys, the signal jammer, they won't fall for any of that twice. They'll find a way to counter everything we've already done. Briggs leaned back against the crate, rubbing his face with one hand. Great, he muttered. We won the battle, and all we did was give them a blueprint for winning the war. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The wind picked up, stirring the dust across the empty airstrip. Briggs knew Tasha was right. The aliens had underestimated Earth once, but next time they wouldn't be so careless. And this time, Earth's military couldn't afford to rely on dumb luck and quick thinking. They need an edge, something unexpected. That night, as the rest of the base settled into a strained quiet, Briggs couldn't sleep. His ribs throbbed, and his mind kept circling back to the alien technology they'd recovered. The broken power cores, the fragmented rifles, the strange devices they couldn't even identify, it all felt too dangerous to ignore. The aliens' tech had relied on physics-defying energy manipulation, and whatever powered those weapons had been designed with precision. It wasn't brute force. It was intelligence, a system so advanced that Earth's best scientists were still scratching their heads trying to understand it. Briggs found himself walking to the research tent, drawn by curiosity. Inside, engineers and scientists worked in tense silence, dissecting the alien components like surgeons working on a fragile patient. Wires spilled across tables, sparks flickered from dismantled cores, and data screens scrolled with indecipherable symbols. One device in particular caught his eye, a cylindrical core, half the size of a soda can, glowing faintly with pulsating light. Its surface was covered in thin, metallic strands that shimmered like liquid. Something about it unsettled him. That's the one we recovered from Zelvik's rifle, a technician said, noticing Briggs staring. We've been analyzing it for hours. Whatever's inside it, it's not normal. Briggs looked closer. What do you mean? The technician scratched his head, clearly frustrated. It's not just a power source, he said. It's adaptive. When we tried to trace its internal circuitry, the wiring patterns kept shifting. We think it's designed to evolve, like it's learning how to resist interference. Every time we hit it with a frequency jammer, it realigns itself to block the disruption. Briggs felt a chill crawl up his spine. You mean, it's alive? Not exactly, the technician said. But it's built to think like it is. Briggs stared at the glowing core. The flickering pulses seemed to follow a pattern, rhythmic and deliberate, like a heartbeat. He didn't know if the device was intelligent or just programmed to adapt, but one thing was clear: Earth was no longer facing an enemy that simply fired better weapons. They were dealing with something that could learn, anticipate, and counter their every move. The realization hit Briggs hard. They hadn't beaten the aliens, they'd just survived the opening round. Whatever came next would be faster, smarter, and deadlier. The next morning, Briggs stood before the gathered strike teams. The soldiers looked tired, their faces pale with exhaustion. He knew they wanted reassurance, a speech that told them the worst was over. But he couldn't lie to them. This isn't finished, Briggs said firmly. Zelvik and his team were just the beginning. We stopped their first strike, but they know how we fight now. They know our tactics. Next time, they won't underestimate us. The crowd was silent. Some soldiers glanced uneasily at one another. Briggs clenched his fists. But here's the thing, Briggs continued. They think they figured us out, that they know how we react and what we're capable of. What they don't know is that we never stop adapting either. He paused, letting his words hang in the air. We're not just going to wait for them to come back, he said. We're going to prepare for them. We're going to outthink them, outmaneuver them, and when they come back looking for a fight, We're going to remind them why Earth is still standing. The soldiers broke into applause, but Briggs hardly noticed. His mind was already racing ahead, planning for the next fight. The aliens had shown their hand, now it was Earth's turn to surprise them. Later that night, Tasha found him outside, standing quietly beneath the stars. You really think we can win? She asked.